everyone, Charlotte from New Zealand Shores here, bouncing in again for the second time this week because we've had a really big announcement about MIQ, or Managed Isolation and Quarantine, that happened yesterday. So the government came out and have announced their next plan for the border restrictions for New Zealand as we move into our next phase of our COVID response. So in New Zealand, and this won't be relevant to anywhere else in the world, but in New Zealand, as our vaccination rates increase, we are moving to what they're calling a traffic light system. So it's basically a set of public health measures where, depending on, I guess, what COVID looks like in our community, they will implement. It means no more lockdowns for New Zealand, which is really awesome. It does just mean there may be some restrictions on things like gathering sizes if COVID's really prevalent, but it does mean everything will remain open. Restaurants, gyms, beauty therapists, everything else, life will kind of start to look a bit more normal for us, which is really cool. In addition to that, as our vaccination rates increase, and once that traffic light system is, I guess, embedded into our COVID response, they're going to start looking to some changes at the border, particularly for managed isolation at this very point in time. So these changes are going to kick in basically from the 14th of November, so 2 weeks away from today, which is really exciting. So the first thing that actually comes before the 14th is that from the 1st of November, everyone entering New Zealand who isn't a New Zealand resident, so that includes people on critical purpose visitor visas, New Zealand residents, New Zealand permanent residents, anyone else who arrives into the country at the moment must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So you will need to carry some form of evidence with you that you have been vaccinated when travelling from Monday. So that's a really important factor in basically everything I'm going to discuss from that point forward. Then from the 14th of November, that's when we start to see those changes in MIQ. So at the moment, everyone arriving into New Zealand spends 14 days in MIQ, which is Managed Isolation and Quarantine. So they are hotels, which are 4 or 5 star, which have been set up by the government to handle people arriving into New Zealand. It's been our safeguard for the last 18 months to prevent massive outbreaks of COVID. But obviously, COVID's now in our community and our vaccination rates are starting to increase. So we can actually start to look to ease those restrictions at the border. So from the 14th, anyone arriving into New Zealand will now only spend 7 days in managed isolation and quarantine. So that's 7 days in one of those hotels. You will then be able to isolate at home, which may be an Airbnb for a lot of our clients who are arriving into the country at the moment. Isolate at home Airbnb for 3 days, and once you have returned a negative test on your 3rd day of your home isolation, then you're able to move out into the community. So it is a massive bonus. One, it's less time stuck in that hotel room, which if you're traveling with a family can be really stressful. You do get to then move into a more comfortable environment, whether that is a home or a holiday home, and then you can move out into the community 4 days earlier than what you have been able to previously, which is really awesome. So that is the first big change coming up. It does also free up approximately 1,500 rooms per month in MIQ at the moment, so that a lot of those will actually be re-released to people who are trying to get into New Zealand. So there will be some more spaces available in MIQ, but some of those will actually also be used for our COVID response here in New Zealand. So obviously Auckland has its own little outbreak at the moment, and people who are unable to isolate safely in their home addresses are actually being put in those MIQ hotels. So less international arrivals coming into New Zealand, and spending 14 days in that hotel system actually allow the government to sort of, I guess, manage our response better. So that's really great. The next stage, which they have announced is due to kick off in the first quarter of 2022, so between January and April, will mean that people coming into New Zealand who are fully vaccinated will actually be able to isolate at home only. Now, we don't know how long that's going to be for. That hasn't yet been announced, because I guess we'll get to see, you know, those little intricacies once we actually get to that point. But it does show that the government is actually working on a plan. So fingers crossed that in the next couple of months we actually get more information on that. But it will actually allow the government to allow more people into New Zealand. And that is when it becomes really important for our clients. They have already touched on the fact impact yesterday that in that home isolation that begins purely from January 2022, that will actually include people who have the right to enter New Zealand, and that will extend to visa holders. So skilled workers, international students, it won't extend to tourists just yet, purely because obviously people coming into New Zealand on holiday, I guess, don't have the inclination necessarily to actually want to follow through with that home isolation. Whereas if you're coming as a student or a worker, you will be able to organise an address to spend that time in isolating at home, and you will also be able to demonstrate that to the government, and you have an added reason to actually adhere to those rules because you're either coming to work or study. So that will, I guess, be what the first quarter of 2022 looks like. The third step of their plan is, I guess, in the second quarter, so hopefully sometime from April onwards, they will actually start to move away from home isolation completely. So that will mean anyone coming into New Zealand will actually go directly into the community. So that will be, I guess, when we start to see a lot more of our clients in particular being able to enter without any restrictions. So that will mean really great things for the likes of skilled workers coming into the country and international tourists as well. We are expecting that there will be some kind of risk assessment placed on that. So you may find that Immigration New Zealand and the government actually determine people, the risk factor. So are you from a high risk country with low vaccination rates and high COVID, or are you from a country with really high vaccination rates and not a lot of COVID prevalent in the community? So we'll also start to see what that risk assessment looks like. But yeah, key factor for everyone is you must be vaccinated when entering New Zealand, and that will definitely continue for the foreseeable future. So we're really looking forward to that change coming start of next year, which will, it'll mean we actually get to start welcoming quite a few more people into the country, which will be really exciting for us. The time frame that they have attached to this, I guess, staged reopening, it actually gives them time to develop the technology that they will use to, I guess, monitor that people are actually isolating at home, which is really important because obviously we need something to ensure that people are sticking to the rules to make sure that the response actually works. And more information on that will actually be available within the next 3 weeks. So as soon as we have that information, we will again share that with you. They are also introducing an expansion of one-way quarantine-free travel with parts of the Pacific Islands. So that is, won't actually really have too much of an impact for the majority of our clients, but it does help New Zealand get in some more seasonal employers, because every year we have a large number of people that come from the Pacific Islands to do things like pick fruit, work in our farming industries, aquaculture, all sorts of different things. So it's really great, not only for our own economy, but also for the economies of the Pacific Islands as well. So even though that particular change doesn't have much of an impact for our clients, it does actually mean that, we can see that the government is starting to open travel back up, and we can see that, things are actually starting to happen after what has felt like a really long period of things not happening. So yeah, watch this space as we get more information about what that home isolation framework looks like, and as soon as we get more updates on that, we will 100% let you guys know. But definitely just wanted to share that with you before the long weekend. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, particularly if you are arriving into New Zealand in the next couple of weeks and you already have that MIQ spot booked and you're not sure what that process will now look like for you, please do reach out. Likewise, if you are a skilled healthcare worker or another critical worker and you are waiting to apply for a critical purpose visitor visa or a border exemption and you don't know what that MIQ process will look like, please do reach out, because we can absolutely answer those questions for you and chat through that process. So looking forward to hearing from everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will be in touch next week. See you later. Bye.